Let's imagine you need to decide which of the following people you would put your trust in. Which would you choose? Candidate A associates with ward healers and consults with astrologists. Has had 2 mistresses, chain smokes and drinks 8 to 10 martinis a day. Candidate B was kicked out of office twice, sleeps until noon, used opium in college and drinks a quart of brandy every evening. Candidate C is a decorated war hero, a vegetarian, doesn't smoke, drinks an occasional beer and has had no illicit love affairs. Which of these people would you choose? Candidate A is Franklin Roosevelt. Candidate B is Winston Churchill. Candidate C is Adolf Hitler. You may or may not have chosen Candidate C, but we think you would agree that most people wouldn't choose Adolf Hitler had they known all the facts. What we're trying to show here is the way you choose to present information about someone can have a huge impact on the way that person is perceived. If the first time you ever hear about that person is through the media, and the media have chosen to show them in a bad light instead of a factual one, then chances are that is all you know about that person and you'll form an incorrect opinion of them. If this has happened and you discover the information you were fed were wrong, can you then drop the belief you have formed about that person and see the information with fresh eyes? Or is it difficult to drop an opinion once it's formed? Do you question the information that is given to you, or do you just accept it as fact? In this documentary, we aim to expose some of the techniques used by the media to distort our view of factual information. The journalists in these cases we are highlighting have attacked the person and not the facts. They have no interest in critical journalism, and because of this have used distorted fact or no fact at all to back up the claims they have made, and have shown no consideration for the harm they've caused in doing so. The harm is not only potentially devastating to the individual that has been attacked and the people close to them, but in the case of the healers it is a potential tragedy for many patients who the healer will never see, the people who need the service the healer has provided but is scared away by the lies. To tell the story they want to tell, the media use many numerous techniques. We have chosen to focus on their use of bias, misrepresentation and dramatisation. In using these techniques, journalists blatantly breach their very own code of ethics time and again. Journalistic code of ethics do vary a little, but essentially say the same thing. Here are a few relevant points from 2 such codes. The Australian MEAA, or Media Entertainment Arts Alliance, Journalistic Code of Ethics states the following. MEAA members engage in journalism commit themselves to honesty, fairness, independence, respect for the rights of others. Point 1 states that journalists must report and interpret honestly, striving for accuracy, fairness and disclosure of all essential facts. Do not suppress relevant available facts or give distorting evidence. Do your utmost to give a fair opportunity for reply. And in point 4, journalists should not allow personal interest or any belief, commitment, payment, gift or benefit to undermine your accuracy, fairness or independence. And according to the Society of Professional Journalistic Code of Ethics, deliberate distortion is never permissible. Furthermore, it is the task of the journalist to present balanced, impartial and unprejudiced facts. Editors must present a wide range of views and not privilege one over the other. The people we are about to introduce you to are outspoken individuals, whistleblowers and innovators that have been attacked by the media. It is dangerous, it seems, for them to stray away from what society wants us to see and hear. If you stray away from the consensus, you get flattened. Our first case study is Stanislaw Burzynski. Stanislaw Burzynski is a doctor and biochemist who owns and runs the Burzynski Clinic in Houston, Texas. He has developed treatments he provides as an alternative to chemotherapy for patients suffering from cancer. Is this why he was targeted by the press? Because he is operating outside of current medical wisdom? The second is Fiona Barnett. Fiona Barnett is a whistleblower of child sexual abuse. She has put herself out there in the media spotlight in an attempt to expose the extent of pedophilia and child abuse in Australia. The people she has attempted to expose include prime ministers and high-ranking officials. Fiona Barnett did this in 2013, after constant threats to herself and her family's safety left her feeling she had no choice but to come forward and expose what she knew. But not all of the media was comfortable with the disturbing nature of what was exposed, so they attacked her credibility, as was the case with Liz Mulliner. Liz Mulliner is the CEO of the Heal for Life Foundation. The foundation provides residential healing programs for survivors of childhood trauma and abuse in Australia and more recently the UK. Again, it seems that exposing uncomfortable truths is the reason behind the attack on this man, Matthew Mike. Mike has been working in the healing profession since 1991 as a massage therapist. He also owned a property in Western Australia where he ran meditation retreats at the time of the media attack. Mike learnt from his own experience and, from what his clients say, has had a very unique approach to helping people deal with trauma by understanding how the body functions and the nature of disassociation. Using the above 4 people, we will showcase some examples of the media's use of bias, misrepresentation and dramatisation to intentionally influence their viewers to see these people in a certain, in these cases, negative way. In using these techniques, these journalists blatantly breach their very own code of ethics time and again. The viewer will likely assume that investigative media use a critical and balanced approach to their articles and programs about particular individuals. Unfortunately, it seems in the present media environment, a critical and balanced approach is rare, and that it is common for bias to be present. Here are some examples of where the media have taken a biased approach to their reporting, starting out with Dr. Baczynski. Have you ever listened to or read a news story and thought it sounded one-sided? Or did you feel the piece didn't report the whole story or the most important aspect of the story? The Alliance for Natural Health USA, or ANH USA, did something about it as well. They published an article they called an exclusive in January 2014 titled Inside USA Today's Smear Campaign Against Dr. Baczynski. According to Wikipedia, USA Today shares the position of having the widest circulation of any newspaper in the United States, with the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times an approximate daily reach of 7 million readers as of 2016. It's distributed in 50 states, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, with an international edition distributed in Canada, Asia, the Pacific Islands and Europe. Clearly, USA Today is able to reach and therefore, if they so choose, influence a great number of people. The ANH USA article asked why the multi-platform news and information company USA Today was writing biased articles against Baczynski. The articles were a series of shamelessly slanted articles smearing cancer pioneer Dr. Stanislaw Baczynski. They go on to say, first they malign the cancer pioneer and then they refuse him the ability to rebut the allegations. And then that the personal attack on Dr. Baczynski, who has helped so many people survive incurable cancers, seemed to us particularly offensive. In an exclusive interview with the doctor and renowned healthcare lawyer Rick Jaff, ANH USA say they learned how USA Today's reporting manipulated its readers and then further obscured the truth by denying Baczynski his right to respond. But even here, where the bias is being exposed by ANH USA, they themselves have admitted the fact that Rick Jaff is Dr. Baczynski's lawyer. According to Jaff, both these articles were riddled with inaccuracies and promoted outrageous, far-fetched speculations. Jaff went on to say that these folks had to get very creative to dismiss the fact that so many terminally ill brain cancer patients are still alive. But that's the nature of bias. Facts don't matter. ANH USA say they have independently evaluated these articles and agree with Mr. Jaff's assessment. They included in their article the following statements. Dr. Baczynski submitted a rebuttal that cited hard data about his treatments, But according to Dr. Basinski and Mr. Jaff, USA Today claimed that, due to the letter's length, they were unable to print it in its entirety and sent back an edited version that was stripped of any specific facts and statistics. Basinski then submitted a much shorter letter that still included hard facts. Again, the USA Today refused to publish, this time claiming that they had fact-checked all of the letters to the editor and couldn't verify Dr. Basinski's statistics, which is ironic, Mr. Jaff told A&H USA, because they certainly didn't fact-check their articles on Dr. Basinski. It bears questioning why the USA Today would use such bias in the representation of Basinski. Why would they not take a genuine interest in a man who is doing groundbreaking work that is actually saving lives? If the facts speak for themselves, is there any need to engage the use of bias at all? This simple truth exposes that the facts are not the purpose of USA Today's stories, because they do speak for themselves in this case. So what do the stories do? What is their effect? To discredit Basinski and his work? There is no disclosure of the sources of claims made in the USA Today's article. Fiona Barnett is another outspoken individual that was presented in the media in a very biased fashion by a program called Media Watch that prides itself on being Australia's leading forum for media analyst and comment. The ABC's Media Watch episode that aired on the 2nd of November 2015, episode 40, is deliberately misleading. It is defamatory in its presentation and an unjustifiable personal attack on a courageous whistleblower. Fiona Barnett's claims made local and international news. Media Watch, referring to Barnett's claims, then states,
"We reckon they should have been treated with a lot more caution."
Media Watch is not asking what we, the viewer, reckons, but instead, with comments like these, are openly influencing their viewers to perceive and judge the information being presented in the same way as Media Watch perceives and judges it.
So, should the media have given prominence to her claims about pedophile prime ministers? We think not. Should they also have given credence to claims of a high-level cover-up? Again, the answer is no.
It would seem here that Media Watch is making out that prime ministers and high-ranking officials, as our public servants, could not possibly be pedophiles or perpetrators of sexual abuse, and that if they were involved, they would not or should not be accountable, because their main criticism in this passage seems to be that media outlets covered or believed Fiona Barnett's story. At the same time, they are clearly implying that Barnett is not to be believed. This is blatantly biased, and at no point does Media Watch even consider that Barnett's claims might be true, which itself raises the question of why. Accountability has to be in place so that it becomes clear when there are patterns of bias playing out. For example, if a manager gives 10 performance reviews, 5 to men and 5 to women, and 4 out of 5 highest reviews are given to women, it should at the very least raise the question of whether there might be a pro-female bias in the process. It might be a total coincidence, but it is worth checking. When individuals are the subjects of media attention, they are very often presented in a biased way, a way that shows them only in the light that the journalist wants to show them in. The viewer is encouraged to judge them, such as through the misrepresentation of a mistake or error, incomplete or distorted presentation of facts, or the inclusion of irrelevant but misleading information. If we as the viewer remain open to questioning, we may be surprised to see that what we are being given is a biased and prejudiced view from just one side of the story, or even a whole new story. Bias may very well be impossible to drive out of human behaviour, but by remaining open and trusting in our own ability to receive and assess information, we can create an environment where the blatant and repugnant, biased and influence currently dominating the media won't so easily sway us. Four Corners is another program that prides itself on excellence in journalism and filmmaking, and describe that they exist to serve the public interest and you. You really must wonder how this can be when you see here the biased way they have presented Matthew Mike in their programming. How can biased reporting be seen as excellent in journalism and serving you and the public interest? The ABC's Over the Edge is startlingly biased. In fact, it is so blatant in its bias that it could be used as a textbook example. The piece opens with spooky music that wouldn't be out of place in a thriller, setting the viewer up to feel uneasy and on edge. Then the journalist starts the narration, and in the very first sentence the bias is established, for Bertelle Humphrey and against her untrained therapist. It is subtle but very powerful. We are introduced to Bertelle by name. We are told that she is a primary school teacher, which pulls on the viewer's heartstrings and puts her on a societal pedestal of sorts. She is shown walking down a suburban street at night in what appears to be her work clothes, making her appear hard-working but vulnerable. The majority of male and female viewers would now be relating to Bertelle, even feeling protective of her. We are then told that Bertelle was under the influence of her therapist, and the therapist convinced her that she had unknowingly survived extreme abuse. Use of the words under the influence and convinced imply that the therapist is unscrupulous, devious, abusive of power and manipulative.
Bertelle Humphrey is a primary school teacher in Perth. For 5 years she was under the influence of an untrained therapist who convinced her she had repressed memories of extreme sexual abuse.
We are then shown an excerpt from a close-up interview with Bertelle.
It was initially that my father had raped me when I was a child. Then it was that my mother and my brothers were involved.
Furthering the viewer's feeling of intimacy with and relating to her. The ABC's choice for Bertelle's first spoken words are dramatic and explicit, building viewer sympathy for her while simultaneously building disgust and revulsion for the as yet unnamed therapist. Within the opening 34 seconds, the ABC has shown their bias, blatantly influencing their viewers to see Bertelle as a victim and the therapist as mind-controlling perpetrator. From this point on, the piece is reduced to sensationalism and titillation. For anyone interested in the truth, there is no point watching any further. The ABC has not served the public with fairness or honesty. For Mike, the implications and effects of such journalism were no doubt catastrophic. The bias in this piece goes on and gets much, much worse. There are dozens of examples, a few of which will be exposed here. The narrator modulates her tone of voice to make impact when she chooses, further influencing the viewer. For example, she almost spits Mike's name.
The therapist was Matthew Mike.
The language she uses is extreme, conclusive, and highly influential, leaving the viewer with no chance to form their own opinion of either Mike or his clients. We are told in actual spoken words that he
destroyed lives. Tonight, some of those people take the brave decision to speak out as we confront Matthew Mike with the consequences of his actions.
Note her tone of voice in that one excerpt alone. Did you see it coming and block it? Or did it influence you before you had the chance to think for yourself? Instead of reporting facts in a balanced way, the ABC's reporter intentionally influenced viewers to see Mike as a seedy, even perverted manipulator. This is an outright abuse of their powerful position in a supposedly reputable news program. It is also directly in convention of the journalistic code of ethics. She appears not even to consider that she might be defending a group of child sex abusers. Tellingly, none of Mike's clients beyond the unhappy 11 who volunteered were given airtime. There is no way to know whether the ABC attempted to contact satisfied and supportive clients to provide a more complete picture of Mike and his work. The daughters of the families in question are openly discussed and criticised, but not given the chance to speak for themselves. Or if they were, that footage was not included. Either way, why not? This alone is proof that the ABC had a premeditated motive to make the episode, to attack, malign and discredit Mike. Why would the ABC do this, instead of being interested in discovering and sharing the truth? We've looked at Bertelle already. The next people we're introduced to are Michael and Joanna.
Michael, who wants to be known only by his first name, was taken over the edge of sanity by bogus therapy sessions in which he was convinced he had molested children.
I said to Sarah that I had raped her child.
He confessed to raping children.
This scene and this family is introduced with the same prejudice, false and sensational allegations as scene 1. Nobody can know what really happened to Bertelle Humphrey or to Michael, and again the ABC does not even seem to consider the possibility that the allegations made against these people she's so blatantly representing might be true.
Well, after a long, hard drive, we finally arrived at our destination, Perth, WA. And it's beautiful.
The content of this footage is skewed. The viewer is set up to believe that Michael and Joanna are a happy, trouble-free couple whose dream of a better life in Western Australia is about to be shattered. A better life compared to what? Why do they need a fresh start? The happy, bouncy music that plays as it is introduced is part of the setup. Let's look at what we know of Mike from the piece. He is helping people to heal from severe trauma, including sexual abuse, a trauma that few ever fully recover from. He claims to have worked with thousands of people and had great success with them. Why did the ABC not approach any of them? His work is groundbreaking and original and based on his own experience. He does not claim to be a therapist.
I don't even want to call myself a therapist, but really just a human being that understands that pain is a natural part of life.
Joanna and Michael are happy with Mike and his work for many years.
When she came back, she was a changed person. She was the person that I'd known before she had children. She was just wonderful.
Thanks to him and the retreat environment, I just felt like someone had actually listened to me for once, a different take and a different insight into what depression is.
As is Bertelle.
It was really good. I got a lot out of it. Just general feeling better about myself and confidence and all that sort of stuff that, you know, people go to see counsellors for.
Their view of Mike and his work only changes after the memories of sexual abuse surface. This significant point is overlooked by the ABC. It appears as though the ABC got Mike to agree to be interviewed under false pretenses by telling him she was there to interview him on a completely different topic. Because of this, she was easily able to ambush Mike and get his perfectly natural anger at being tricked in such a way on film, and then use that footage as she wished, which she did of course, to influence people to see him in a bad light.
I came to see you about what it is you do.
No, you didn't come to see me about... Hold it. No, stop butting in. You did not come to see me about what it is I do. You came to see me about this concern that you had that the medical profession... Yeah, get out of here. No, bugger off. You have come here under false pretences. You have come here under false pretences. Come and sit down.
I'm happy to sit down.
Come and sit down. I want to talk to you. This is disgusting.
I think...
What on earth do you think you're doing? Sit down and we'll have a talk.
Come on, tell us.
What have you guys come to see us about?
It bears remembering that before complying the piece, the ABC would have had access to the full array of information and material they had collected. From that, they then determine how they will tell their story. Everything to the things included in each frame, camera angles, lighting, language, tone of voice, everything is intentionally chosen and then inserted into the footage, where it will best communicate the ABC's bias. Yet, with all that they had access to, they didn't once question why the now unhappy clients of Mike went to him in the first place. The telling fact that they were troubled people looking for help, who willingly went to Mike and continued going to him and being helped by him, as is stated by some of the clients in the piece, until such time as the memories of extreme sexual abuse came up. And it's not just over the edge. It appears that Colleen Egan of the Sunday Times was the first to break the story of Mike's unhappy ex-clients. Ferguson and Agarn seem to be cut from the same cloth, both resorting to biased, misleading and sensationalistic work. Perhaps Ferguson was influenced by Agarn, and that is why she never stops to consider there might be another side to the story. 730 with Lee Sales believes it provides the best analysts of local, national and international events from an Australian perspective. Is it the Australian perspective to encourage the public to be biased in the way you look at people that are working to help others? You'd think so after looking at their program on Liz Mulliner and the Heal for Life retreats. The program's presenter Sales and the reporter Lee Bailey and the program's producers have done a pretty good job in presenting a biased view of Liz Mulliner and the Heal for Life retreats. With such influence bombarding the viewer doesn't really get an opportunity to consider the possible alternative view that would give a more balanced presentation. Using language such as
disturbing accusations are being made about a foundation called Heal for Life that runs retreats for child sexual abuse victims in 4 states of Australia. It was founded by the high-profile former TV and movie casting agent Liz Mulliner. It runs programs for children as young as 7 years old, as well as teenagers and adults.
With a 90 to 95% success rate with the over 6,500 guests that have attended their retreats, and having been in operation for 14 years, with those guests being taken care of by over 70 volunteer carers at any one time, why has the ABC only interviewed a few disgruntled and unhappy former volunteers to present this biased view?
Heal for Life advertises a 90% success rate, but some former staff and volunteers have told 730 they've left here feeling more damaged than when they arrived.
I went there to heal and they only caused me more trauma.
For the first time in my life, I am medically unable to work, and it's been about 8 months now.
You need to feel safe to heal. It wasn't a safe place.
Is the deliberate editing and producing into a program of highly influential and biased material? Sales introduces the program with some serious allegations that
some of those carers have now come forward to 730. They complain of inadequate training, routine self-harm, bizarre allegations of a satanic cult and false recovered memories of ritual abuse.
Towards the end of the program, after the story and the influence have already been set up, 730 published a small snippet of Heal for Life's written statement in response to the story. Heal for Life neither accepts nor tolerates self-harm. Guests or volunteers are generally asked to leave a program if they breach the rule against self-harm, when in fact, Heal for Life provided a much more comprehensive response in their statement to 730 that directly contradicts the program's biased presentation, including, with one exception, none of the former carers or staff who appeared on the ABC 730 report raised any of the issues while they were working at Heal for Life, and none of them left Heal for Life because of those issues. All of them have previously praised the Heal for Life programs and their effect on survivors of childhood trauma.
And on the subject of self-harm,
HFL neither accepts nor tolerates self-harm. Guests or volunteers are generally asked to leave a program if they breach the rule against self-harm.
Why wasn't Sarah Monahan interviewed by 730? The high-profile Heal for Life attendee also published the following comments on her website in response to the 730 program. I attended a healing week at Heal for Life. It was an amazing experience. I learnt more about myself in 1 week at Heal for Life and came home happier and more at peace with myself than any other experience I've had on my long road to healing. While I was there was no discussion of satanic abuse. It was never suggested to me that I was a victim of satanic abuse. I never heard anyone else discuss it either. The first day I was there, we signed a statement saying we would not engage in self-harm and could be sent home if we did. Sarah also makes the intelligent observation. If you want to attack an institution, why not find people who will claim there's talk of conspiracy theories and satanic abuse, so that when you ask people why they're being discredited, if they say they think it's part of a smear campaign, you can then attack them as being paranoid. You can discredit someone even further while they try to defend themselves. Their only option is not to defend themselves. Then people will also claim that if they're not defending themselves, it must be true. It's quite brilliant manipulation, really. If you think about it, this simple statement really reveals the lack of intelligence applied by the ABC in its two 7:30 reports on Liz Mulliner and the Four Corners program on Matthew Mike. In the latest 7:30 report presented by Sarah Ferguson and reported again by Rebecca Bailey, the story reinforced the biased allegations made in the earlier program and introduces the family of a Heal for Life attendee, Joanna Hennessy, who committed suicide after a lifetime of abuse and mental illness.
Late last year, we brought you the story of Heal for Life, a retreat in the New South Wales Hunter Valley for survivors of child abuse, founded by former high-profile film casting agent Liz Mulliner. That story featured disturbing tales from some former staff and volunteers who claimed self-harming and diagnosis of satanic ritual abuse was common at the retreat. Since then, a grieving family has contacted 7:30 to tell of their experience with Heal for Life.
Bailey presented the family as being aggrieved by Liz Mulliner in a letter Mulliner read out at Joanna's funeral. The letter was read at the request of Joanna's husband to explain the extreme life challenges that Joanna had experienced. 7:30 did not interview Joanna's husband, who was clearly the real aggrieved, but instead reported a biased presentation of a so-called aggrieved, but in reality estranged, family of Joanna.
Joanna Hennessy was unable to overcome her demons and died of a heroin overdose in June 2012. Her packed funeral was held at the Northside Salvation Army Church in Geelong. Liz Mulliner was there and gave a eulogy which shocked the grieving family.
I'd never heard of Liz Mulliner's name until I saw it on the order of service. And she stood up and told the congregation that Jo had had a totally abusive childhood and that she had never experienced love during her childhood, never experienced love until she got together with, presumably with Liz Mulliner's own people.
She read out a letter. She talked about Jo's different personalities and names that Jo had given to her different personalities, none of which I'd ever heard before.
This was all in the guise of a letter from Jo. And it said, I've experienced abuse and I've experienced hatred and I've experienced satanic ritual abuse, whatever that is.
I feel that she was, I'm trying to find the right word, intimating that the family were evil.
Why would the ABC condone the seemingly portrayal of a family as victims when there was factual evidence available from many sources, including her husband, of Joanna's father and stepmother having physically and emotionally abused her, and of her father being an alleged pedophile? Some of the information that was available to the ABC and never used in the 7:30 report has been published in a statement by Heal for Life in a response to the program, fully referenced from independent sources. Here is some of the information that was available. The ABC effectively supported an alleged perpetrator without ever attempting to tell the victims, i.e. Miss Hennessy's, or in her absence, her husband's, side of the story. While at the treatment centre Odyssey House, Miss Hennessy accused her father and stepmother of physical abuse during the period she was living with them. These allegations were made to counsellors at Odyssey House, who also recorded their suspicion that she had also been sexually abused. Also while at Odyssey House, Miss Hennessy described the best thing that had ever happened to her as getting away from her father. In correspondence to her father in 2000, Miss Hennessy accused her father of having sexually abused her. The ABC had failed to ask anyone other than the alleged perpetrator and his family about when allegations of abuse had first been made. If the ABC had done so, it would have discovered that the allegations of physical abuse had first been made about 30 years before Miss Hennessy attended Heal for Life, and that the allegations of sexual abuse had first been made about 10 years before Miss Hennessy attended Heal for Life. There are a number of people who would have revealed the true situation to the ABC if they had done their research properly. Miss Hennessy's husband, the foster parents who raised her when her father would not, her close friends, various people that Miss Hennessy had come into contact with at Heal for Life, and the relatively large number of psychologists that Miss Hennessy had consulted since she was a young child. The words to which Miss Hennessy's birth family took offence were Miss Hennessy's own words written before her death, and the father's criticisms may have been nothing more than an attempt to discredit a victim of his abuse. Interestingly, there is a disturbing consistency between the bias in Ferguson's presentation of Liz Mulliner in this 7:30 report, her presentation of Matthew Mike in the Over the Edge Four Corners program, and the recent 2017 Four Corners program blatantly promoting Hillary Clinton and discrediting Julian Assange. John Pilger, the admittent journalist and documentary filmmaker, highlighted the bias to Ferguson in his article The ABC's War on Truth in the following excerpts from the article. ABC journalist Sarah Ferguson's recent interview with Hillary Clinton was almost as devoid of journalism as it was of reality and facts, John Pilger reports. The ABC Australian interview with Clinton is an outstanding example of smear and censorship by admission. I would say it is a model. Clinton repeatedly defamed Assange, who was neither defended nor offered a right of reply on his own country's state broadcaster. In the years I have known Julian Assange, I have watched a vituperative personal campaign try to stop him and WikiLeaks. It has been a frontal assault on whistleblowing, on free speech and free journalism, all of which are now under sustained attack from governments and corporate internet controllers. It is like watching the guardians of the status quo, regardless of age, struggling to silence real disdain and prevent the emergence of new and hopeful. In the Ferguson presented programs reviewed in this program, she comes out pretty grubby as a very effective perpetrator of the frontal assault on whistleblowing, on free speech and free journalism, and encouraging the status quo and promoting a collective apathy towards the obliteration of free speech. The resilience and courage of her victims are astonishing, unlike the outspoken individuals they discredit. Their tormentors are cowards. The Society of Professional Journalistic's own code of ethics states that journalists should be ethical, objective, free of cultural bias, impartial and accurate in their gathering, reporting and interpreting information. It doesn't take a hardened critical thinker to see that in the preceding four examples, the journalists and the producers concerned have been a long way from being objective, impartial and accurate in the presentation of their reporting. John Pilger, in his article The ABC's War on Truth, quotes Julian Assange's interesting Twitter response to the 2017 Four Corners program, calling the ABC out on their own ethics policy. In a tweet from London, Assange cites the ABC's own code of practice, which states, "Where allegations are made about a person or an organisation, make responsible efforts in the circumstances to provide a fair opportunity to respond." A fair opportunity to respond. Not likely. The media presents a set of information in a particular way to tell a particular story about a person. You can tell a story in a variety of ways depending on the story you want to tell. You can misrepresent people, facts or information, omit information, or even just get the information you want together to tell the version of the story you want to tell, not even bothering to pursue other sources that may show the story in a different light. Presented here are four examples of individuals and organisations that have been strongly misrepresented in the media. Stanislaw Buzinski has been treating cancer patients with what he calls anti-neoplastin therapy, at his Brzezinski clinic in Texas since 1976.
And this is something which is called today precision medicine, which means finding out what is causing cancer, which genes are causing cancer, and the treatment of the genes by using medications which work on the genes, not by chemotherapy, but new generation of medications which are gene-targeted medications and immunotherapy. So that's what we do, and one of the main medications which we are using are those which we discovered, which are medications from anti-neoplasm group.
Many of his patients have testified at trials held by the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, that he has cured them of cancers.
An MRI 6 weeks after we started Dr. Brzezinski's treatment revealed no tumor.
Neoplasms who will immediately force these malignant cells to die by working on the genes.
So over the course of the last 8 years, annual MRIs have confirmed all that's left of the tumor is scar tissue, and I've been off of treatment for that entire time. So Dr. Brzezinski cured me of a brain tumor.
It's as if she had a bacterial infection and Brzezinski treated it with antibiotics.
Now the FDA is saying to me, no, your doctor is a criminal, he should be put in jail, and he needs to be shut down. This is criminal.
In 1991, the National Cancer Institute sent a panel of experts to Houston, and they determined that in each case of advanced brain cancer, Dr. Brzezinski's treatment caused anti-cancer effect.
These are often cancers that could not be cured by chemotherapy. According to the World Health Organization, cancer is the second leading cause of death globally and was responsible for 8.8 million deaths in 2015. Considering this, it's not unreasonable to expect that journalists would be interested in covering these success stories and Brzezinski's discoveries. But despite the results Brzezinski is achieving, the media continues to try and attack his character and the treatments that he provides. Take Craig Mallistow, for example, a journalist at the Houston Press online newspaper. Mallistow has written several articles about Brzezinski, all of which have a disclaimer at the bottom stating that Craig Mallistow covers crooks, quacks, animal abusers, elected officials, and other assorted people for the Houston Press. There is a very clear implication here that Mallistow's subjects could be quacks, crooks, or animal abusers. It is left up to the viewer to determine which. This disclaimer makes the viewer question the reputation of Mallistow's subjects. In the case of Brzezinski, because he is a doctor, the insinuation is that he is a quack. Mallistow's headlines are also good examples of misrepresentation, such as this, another article he wrote on Brzezinski that was published on the 17th of October 2016 titled, "Texas Medical Board Whiffs in Latest Crusade Against Controversial Doc." As someone who owns real newspapers with over 100 journalism awards, this piece is very disturbing to me that it is so obviously one-sided and ignores the success of the doctor and others using alternative treatments that are having to cure cancer, especially when they're harassed and brought under review time after time after time for nothing. You should be ashamed. After these comments were made, Mallistow published a third article on the 17th of February 2017 that did include a more balanced view in its portrayal of Brzezinski, although this also had the effect of highlighting the lack of balance in the first two articles. And again, he used a misrepresentative title in the third article being "Unorthodox Doc Stanislaw Brzezinski faces $360,000 fine and probation." Dr. Brzezinski was only ever found $60,000, and in fact this article was published before the end of trial, so the Houston Press could not have known what he was to be fined. Eric Marola, who produced a documentary about Brzezinski, gives some background information on the fine that was given. On his website, brzezinskimovie.com, he says that on March 3, 2017, the Texas Medical Board, TMB, and its board staff concluded their multi-year-long attempt to revoke Dr. Brzezinski's medical license. And then there's this. While the board's staff sought to revoke Dr. Brzezinski's medical license, they failed. According to the judges, it was found that 94 of the board's charges against Dr. Brzezinski were unproven, with only 6% considered true. But this 6% was based on documentary issues, such as bookkeeping errors. Of the non-documentation issues, that is, things that specifically have to do with the actual practice of medicine, the judges found that they failed to prove 99.996% of the charges against Brzezinski, while proving 0.004% of the charges. Numerous other articles by other journalists contain misrepresentation of Brzezinski, but none have gone as far as Ed Cara on the Via Active news website, who suggests that Brzezinski has been responsible for the death of a child, saying that the FDA placed a partial clinical trial of his treatment on hold following the death of a 6-year-old boy who died while on anti-neoplastin therapy. No explanation of the circumstances are given here, and Brzezinski has never been convicted of harming a child. Clearly, none of this is clear factual journalistic reporting, as very little, if any, fact is ever provided. Similar circumstances existed with Matthew Mike, where his work was misrepresented in a television program that presented Mike in a biased and distorted fashion. In ABC's Over the Edge, Matthew Mike provides a clear description of repressed memories, where, in order to survive traumatic events, the victims of these events cannot recall memories of the events.
There's like a dual personality, where one part is a traumatised person and the other part is the personality that the person uses in day-to-day life.
Mike's explanation fits perfectly with the understanding of the wider mental health industry. Repressed memory, dissociative identity disorder, and split personality syndrome are all understood to be a natural human response to extreme trauma. Yet, of all the people she chose to provide comment on repressed memories in her piece on Mike, Ferguson chooses Professor Ian Hickey from the Brain and Mind Research Institute, who states that
there's great doubt that there is anything of the nature of repressed memories. The idea that memories are there that you do not know about, that can be legitimately raised this way, is highly doubtful.
Hickey's comments are a complete distortion of the facts and further set up Ferguson's intentional representation of Mike as a rogue therapist. On the Matthew Mike Condemnation website, dozens of Mike's clients offer their stories and thanks for Mike's support, understanding and guidance. It is revealing that none of these clients or others who had positive experiences from their interactions with Mike were given the opportunity to be included in Ferguson's piece. Interestingly, the ABC addressed recovered memories in an episode of their Catalyst series a few years later in 2011. In the Catalyst program, the ABC chose to interview renowned dissociative identity disorder and repressed memory expert Professor Warwick Middleton, a psychiatrist holding appointments as adjunct professor, School of Public Health at La Trobe University, and Associate Professor in Psychiatry, University of Queensland, and Professor Richard Bryant from University of New South Wales, a prominent researcher of post-traumatic stress disorder. Professor Ian Hickey did not appear on the Catalyst program. In the Catalyst piece, Middleton highlights research that investigated the impacts of war on combat veterans, analysing 1,000 evacuees from Dunkirk. Of these, 144 had partial or complete amnesia, and the ones who were most likely to have the most extreme amnesia were also the ones that had the most severe traumas. While disagreeing with Middleton regarding the mechanism that causes a victim's inability to access memories of traumatic events, both Bryant and Middleton agree that it happens, and it is not unusual in veterans of war. It is worth making clear that the focus of the Catalyst program was not investigating whether or not recovered memories exist. The reporter states clearly that this is not in question.
So, to be clear, recovered memories of childhood abuse can and do happen, a notion that got muddied at the height of the memory wars. The question remains, though, how?
What they were investigating was the human body's mechanism for making this happen, whether that occurs through a disassociation from the memory or whether the memory was not properly encoded in the first place. Professor Middleton's understanding, based on decades of research and work with hundreds of victims of abuse, mirrors that of Matthew Mike.
Middleton says this is where the dissociation theory really comes to the fore.
I'm talking about compartmentalising trauma, so that you actually create a mechanism for containing the memories and feelings that go with a traumatic event such that it doesn't overwhelm you in the present. So you can actually get somebody who's compartmentalised, you know, the good daddy, as distinct from another compartment behind another firewall which contains the memory of the incestuous abuse. And the two states may be relatively impervious to the other, at least for a time.
The ABC's piece on Catalyst contradicts and negates much of Ferguson's piece on Four Corners. And yet there is no, and as far as yet can be determined, never has been, recognition or admission to the fact that they misrepresented Matthew Mike or distorted facts at all. Which leads one to conclude that Over the Edge was not investigative journalism at all, but rather an intentional attack on someone the media had identified as being worthy of such an attack. From the Condemnation blog, it appears that Mike is another example of person doing groundbreaking work and achieving results that the medical industry cannot explain or accept, and as such, he must be stopped. Liz Mulliner and Heal for Life are another example of where an individual and organisation have been presented in a distorted fashion by the media, where in fact they have been achieving significant results in an area in which the medical industry has been lacking.
Thousands of child abuse survivors have made this journey over the past 14 years. They come to Heal for Life in the New South Wales Hunter Valley to recover from trauma they suffered as children.
If Liz Mulliner and her Heal for Life retreats have helped more than 6,500 people over a period of 14 years, with more than 90% of the guests satisfied with their experience of the retreats, why is the ABC's 7:30 report making such a dramatic issue about a small group's negative experience?
Disturbing accusations are being made about a foundation called Heal for Life that runs retreats for child sexual abuse victims in 4 states of Australia. It was founded by the high-profile former TV and movie casting agent Liz Mulliner. It runs programs for children as young as 7 years old, as well as teenagers and adults. Many abuse victims who attend its week-long healing sessions report positive results. But the problem is that some of those survivors are then recruited as carers themselves, and after just a few days' training are responsible for looking after others who've been severely traumatised by abuse. Some of those carers have now come forward to 7:30. They complain of inadequate training, routine self-harm, bizarre allegations of a satanic cult and false recovered memories of ritual abuse.
The focus of the program is on the complaints of a small group of guests, volunteer carers and employees, 9 in total, at the total exclusion of the over 5,800 satisfied guests who were cared for by over 70 volunteer carers at any one time during the last 14 years of operation. The distortion presented by the 7:30 report is quite obvious when you look objectively at all of the available information. It seems the ABC chose to selectively use the available information to suit the story they have presented. Why hasn't the 7:30 report sought out people to interview who have had a positive experience with the Heal for Life retreats? Particularly when even the high-profile Hey Dad pedophile whistleblower Sarah Monahan published her positive experience of attending a Heal for Life retreat on her website months before the ABC program was aired. The program's introduction talks to the carers' complaints of inadequate training, routine self-harm, bizarre allegations of a satanic cult, and false recovered memories of ritual abuse. The program presents the carers' complaints as facts and suggests that self-harm is routine, training is inadequate, and that attendees' recovered memories are false. With the program's focus on these complaints, the viewer is not given the opportunity to consider an alternative viewpoint. The program sets up a perspective that the viewer really has no choice but to accept, because only one viewpoint is shown. In fact, there is just as much evidence and research supporting that recovered memories can be valid as there is that they can be false.
I didn't do it beforehand. That was something I learnt from them. That was something that was encouraged.
They encouraged
Well,
people
I
to
feel
self-harm?
indirectly because they suggested it, they talked about it, they asked me about it as if it was something I should be doing.
I think it's very common, whether it's through even though it's not encouraged to do it, it's accepted that that's one form of coping mechanism for survivors. All carers have first aid training, but that's it, basic first aid training. I've cared for several people where I've had to tend to their wounds. And as a self-harmer, a former self-harmer myself, I found it very challenging to deal with other people's wounds.
I came out of my healing week self-harming quite regularly again, and in different ways than I'd ever done before. I went on to doing things like burning myself with scalding water or pulling my hair out, just walking into doors on purpose.
Why haven't the ABC sought out people with an alternative viewpoint of their experience at Heal for Life? There is publicly available information that provides an alternative view, including Sarah Monahan's website, where she describes her positive experience in one blog and responds to the ABC's program in another. Why wasn't Sarah interviewed for the program? Sarah's experience would have given at least one alternative viewpoint for the audience to consider. Sarah reinforces Heal for Life's statement that Heal for Life does not tolerate self-harm. She states in her blog, "While I was there was no discussion of satanic abuse. It was never suggested to me that I was a victim of satanic abuse. I never heard anyone else discuss it either. The first day I was there, we signed a statement saying we would not engage in self-harm and could be sent home if we did." Is this a deliberate distortion of the experience of attending a Heal for Life retreat by the ABC? Have the people interviewed simply been self-indulgent? The viewer is not encouraged to consider an alternative. The ABC aired another program about Liz Mulliner and the Heal for Life 5 months later, focusing on the complaints of a so-called grieving family and reinforcing the complaints of the people in the previous program.
All the Chappell family have left of their much-loved daughter and sister are photographs.
She had the most caring, generous spirit I've known.
The program focuses on the family of Joanna Hennessy, who attended a Heal for Life retreat. Joanna has since died of a heroin overdose, and implications were made on the program that Joanna was worse off for her Heal for Life experience. The family were shocked by a eulogy given by Liz Mulliner at Joanna's funeral that revealed that Joanna had memories of an abusive childhood. The eulogy was adapted by Joanna's husband from her own writings. Joanna's husband also had information and records that revealed that Joanna had accused her father and stepmother of physical abuse when she was living with them as a child, and later accused her father of sexually abusing her.
Never experienced love during her childhood, never experienced love until she got together with, presumably with Liz Mulliner's own people.
The accusations were made at a treatment centre called Odyssey House, long before Joanna attended Heal for Life.
She went looking for guidance and stability and she didn't find it, and if anything she found the opposite.
It seems weird to come back from something like that and be worse mentally than you were when you left.
Why did the ABC set up the family as being aggrieved by Liz Mulliner and the process of the funeral when information and records that are available from Joanna's husband would paint a very different picture, one that puts the family's grievances in a very different light? Why didn't the ABC contact Joanna's husband and present a more balanced program. Fiona Barnett is a whistleblower of child sexual abuse that has been similarly discredited by a news program called Media Watch, when in fact there has been considerable other media coverage of what Barnett has exposed that presents her experience in a very different perspective. During the Australian Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse, a Liberal senator exposed a high-level pedophile ring which allegedly included a former Prime Minister and members of the judiciary. That was uncovered during another Royal Commission into New South Wales Police Force but not investigated. This pedophile ring was the same one Fiona Barnett alleges she was a victim of. This episode of the ABC's Media Watch discredits and openly disbelieves Barnett and ridicules the media organisations that cover her story in a supportive way, considering that the allegations made by Barnett were likely under investigation at the time, but that is not the role of the media to decide what is truth and what is not truth. It is concerning that Media Watch purports to be the authority in evaluating other media associations with respect to their journalistic standards and ethics.
But now to another example of sensational crime reporting and some far more remarkable allegations aired in the media 10 days ago.
A woman who says she was the victim of an alleged pedophile ring operating in the 1970s has made explosive claims in Sydney today. Fiona Barnett spoke at a press conference along with members of abuse survivor group SNAP.
Media Watch are blatantly discrediting Barnett and saying the police force and the judiciary's lack of interest in investigating numerous serious claims against dangerous and incredibly powerful people could only indicate that those claims can't be real.
She said she and other victims of VIP perpetrators were stonewalled by authorities.
Surely a sign there might be no evidence for her remarkable claims. Here is Barnett writing last year about the CIA, pedophiles and Nazis.
The key to understanding organised paedophilia in Australia is the thousands of Nazi war criminals to whom our government knowingly offered asylum in this country.
Media Watch uses Barnett's claims of neo-Nazi presence and involvement in abuse in Australia to further discredit her, as though it could not be remotely possible. And yet, in 2010, the ABC's Four Corners program ran an episode about the Nazi Party in Australia. The program goes on to dismiss Fiona as lacking credibility, this time because a conspiracy theory website called Neonetal republished an abridged version of one of Fiona's Independent Australia stories and alleged this was an example of Ninth Circle or satanic ritual abuse.
And here she is again on a site called Neonetal, in which she and a fellow victim recalled
witnessing child sacrifices at the hands of the CIA and the Ninth Circle satanic child sacrifice cult, all trained by former Nazis.
But Barnett has no connection to that website whatsoever, and even though she has said some of her abuse involved rituals, she has not alleged that these rituals were satanic in nature. Of course, the use of rituals by some child abusers has been well documented in Australia, and indeed around the world.
And I saw her ritually sacrificed here in front of all the dignitaries. The head being up this end, on that image, is no accident. That's the way you face on an altar when you ritually sacrifice someone. The head's always up this end. And it's called the left-handed path, so they always use the left hand, and they start with the upper chest area.
Fiona's comments on her documentary Candy Girl regarding ritual sacrifice was spoken of, but nothing of a satanic nature was mentioned, as is claimed by Media Watch. Once again, she has been misrepresented and distorted facts have been presented to the viewer. According to statements on Independent Australia, Media Watch only gave Fiona 24 hours to provide evidence proving she was abused as a little girl decades ago.
We understand that at least 2 journalists have investigated Ms. Barnett's allegations and decided not to publish them. And when we asked her to back up some of her claims, she was unwilling or unable to do so.
Despite attempting to assist them as much as possible in replying to their every email, Fiona declined this absurd request. She had already provided a large amount of evidence to Independent Australia, all supported by statutory declaration. At the very least, the police should be investigating whether she's telling the truth or not. Is Fiona lying, as Media Watch seems to be alleging? Is she fabricating her testimony? You should have the chance to make your own decisions based on the whole picture and all the facts, not just the story based on the misrepresentation of an individual and the distortion of information. Media Watch itself engaged in the worst form of manipulation, telling the Australian public what information they should listen to or believe, and sneeringly smearing the reputation of someone who told a truth of which the decision makers at Media Watch and the ABC did not approve. In all of these cases, the viewer is not given the opportunity to gain their own understanding of the circumstances surrounding the individuals, which have been presented in quite a biased and distorted manner by the media. The incestuous media fraternity feed off each other's sensationalising of stories and dramatising the content to purvey a particular point of view and to influence the viewer, reader or listener into a predetermined line of thinking. They are particularly good at this when obliterating the reputations of outspoken individuals with their sensationalistic and dramatic storytelling. It is very difficult to reverse an initial influence and impression made on the person that is taking the information when it has been deliberately and dramatically imposed and implanted in the mind of that person. Here is a classic example of where the media have used extreme sensationalism and dramatisation to discredit Matthew Mike and drum home a viewpoint that is very difficult to reverse for the unaware viewer. Dramatisation was used to great effect in the ABC's Four Corners episode Over the Edge. The supposed subject of the piece was sexual abuse within families and pedophilia, which are themselves shocking and abhorrent in nature. They don't need dramatising. In fact, to present these topics and stories about them with added drama and effect only makes them seem less believable and beyond the realm of reality. Yet the ABC employed numerous techniques to sensationalise the content of their story and use the result to malign and misrepresent Mike. In this video, more than a dozen individual incidences where the ABC has intentionally misled their viewers in their attack on Mike have been exposed. Of course, there are many more, this is just a selection. The ones that will be covered here are sensationalism and startle effect. Four Corners begins the program with the most sensationalistic piece of information, the taped regression sessions with Brettel Humphrey. According to the Society of Professional Journalists, journalists should not highlight incidents out of context. Yet this is what the editors of Four Corners do repeatedly. When taken out of context, the tapes are startling. They are disturbing to listen to. The startle effect, to cause slight shock or fear, is a popular sensationalistic technique. It intensifies fascination with the topic. The viewer is hooked. Anyone who uses Windows Media Player will be familiar with the squiggly themed visual that screens when playing sound-only files. It's a bit weird, but nothing more than that. But when the ABC uses it as the backdrop to the recording of Brettel Humphrey's regression into the memory of a rape, it enhances feelings of shock and disgust, and of foreignness, both of the regression itself and the topic.
They were prompted by the therapist during intense one-on-one sessions.
Where is he raping you? In which part of your body? The feeling come. Bring your attention into your vagina now. Feel the herb that's in there.
The whole topic of sexual abuse is foreign, or at least we want it to be. We don't want to admit that it happens in our communities, and this visual effect makes it feel even more out there. Yet sexual abuse is common, not foreign. The ABC has also chosen to use parts of the regression that use words rape, anus, vagina, words that are taboo and therefore have a heightened level of drama around them.
Where does he rape you? In the vagina or the anus?
It would actually be a bit shocking to most viewers that the ABC has allowed them to be spoken aloud on air. This is in direct conflict with the Code of Ethics. Avoid pandering to lurid curiosity, even if others do. Their use of these particular excerpts also subtly portray Mike as somewhat of a pervert. This is another example of the use of the startle effect. It is very effective, very easily manipulated and not easily forgotten, and therefore adds another element of drama. One set of alleged perpetrators of abuse is asked to describe the allegations against them.
One of the last ones I remember was I was supposed to have had 6 live mice put on a bare body and doing indecent things with some of them on her.
Some were very graphic. They involved such things as firearms being used, inserted into one of the victims as part of the sexual assault.
Things like pulling the trigger, going click, click, click.
Sick.
Absolutely terrible.
Why did the ABC choose to air such sensational allegations? Among other things, they are encouraging the viewer to see recovered memories of abuse as outrageous because sometimes the content of the memories is outrageous.
Police investigated the allegations against Val and Paul over 12 months. They found no evidence and the case was dropped.
Do we really believe that human beings aren't capable of doing horrific and terrible things to one another and to children? Or that animals wouldn't be used in abuse? They're used in distorted sex, why not abuse? Why does the ABC want to encourage these fairy tales? What is their interest in making extreme sexual abuse seem unbelievable? And how can they so unconsciously and irresponsibly have aired such detailed descriptions of sexual abuse of children? It's as though they've been so obsessed with their attack on Mike and got so caught up in their own creation they've completely overlooked the grave seriousness of their subject matter. Colleen Egan has also used dramatisation in her news article on the story, describing Mike's clientele as a cult, which is full of drama and entices the reader to want to know more. The insights into both sexual abuse and the powerful tools used by the media to malign and misrepresent someone the program she's referring to contained were anything but fascinating. They were extremely disturbing. At least they would have been to anyone able to see through the intentionally created drama. Liz Mulliner is another outspoken individual that has fallen prey to the predatory approach of the media's dramatisation and sensationalistic presentation of a program's content to deliver a predetermined biased message.
Disturbing accusations are being made about a foundation called Heal for Life.
There is a perfect example of how to set up a storyline to have a predetermined effect. Go straight to dramatic language. The real storyline could have been very different. You only need to go as far as checking the information from Sarah Monahan that was available to the ABC before the report and that they didn't use. Sarah makes the following comments in a later blog. I question the motives of the report on Heal for Life. If they can admit that they have great success with attendees, why are they doing a report on the staff and the management? It looks very much like a smear campaign against Liz Mulliner. There are some incidences of inclusion of dramatic language from interviews with some of the volunteers of Heal for Life, deliberately being edited into the program by the ABC to create an influential storyline.
I just got completely burnt out after a year. I was a wreck when I left that place. Absolutely traumatised by the experience.
The ABC chose to publish these comments when completely contradictory information was readily available, like Sarah Monahan points out in her blog. If volunteers at Heal for Life felt burnt out, they could have stopped. They could have said, hey, I need a break for a while. It's okay to take time out. In fact, one of the biggest lessons I learnt at Heal for Life was that it's okay to say no. It's okay to make yourself number one. I have no doubt that being a carer or facilitator at Heal for Life is stressful. The whole idea in the ABC program of encouragement of self-harm at Heal for Life looks like a bit of a partial attempt to ramp up the dramatisation.
The thing about self-harm was that it got much worse when I was at Mary. I've got scars on my arm now, like that I feel are a direct cause by them because I didn't do it beforehand.
The contradiction in these statements is suspicious, especially when the insinuation of self-harm being encouraged is contradicted by Sarah Monahan's statement. Why would the ABC publish such an obvious contradiction like this other than to hype up the drama? Even the dramatic emphasis on the language around the suggestion about people attending Heal for Life coming from satanic ritual abuse backgrounds is pretty suspicious.
You're dealing with extreme situations. I mean, I came across stuff I'd never come across, you know, as a therapist.
Like what?
Extreme self-harm, psychosis, dissociative identity, you know, those sorts of people that come from a satanic ritual abuse background. I mean, that's extreme.
The amount of crazy and horrific stories I heard directly from Liz's mouth about cult activities within the Hunter.
It's almost like a focus, an intense focus on the cult, and I do think there's a bit of paranoia around the cult.
These statements on the program completely contradict the statements from Heal for Life. Heal for Life programs focus on helping people to identify and acknowledge the nature of their abuse or trauma. Discussion of cults or satanic ritual abuse is not a focus of Heal for Life or its programs, and such issues would only be discussed with guests who claimed this was the nature of their abuse. The problem with this lack of fact-checking is that it encourages other media outlets to pick up on the same storyline because they are also too lazy to do the fact-checking, like this story published by the Newcastle Herald. This article makes claims about what Liz Mulliner has said when this is the Newcastle Herald's own unsubstantial fabrication picked up from the ABC's program. This is where the media fabrication starts to get out of control. Take this example of the ABC creating the impression that a volunteer has been treated badly when in fact the volunteer has behaved poorly in carrying out their role at Heal for Life.
He was sacked early last year after admitting he'd had consensual sex with 2 adult women who had been guests at the retreat. After he left, Harry Callaghan claims Liz Mulliner spread rumours that he was involved in a satanic cult and that he had been sexually abusing women at Heal for Life.
It was torture. For me, you know, I've done lots of silly things in my life and I've owned up to each of them. But this stuff, it's madness.
The impression created by the ABC completely contradicts the statement from Heal for Life. Harry Gallahan, a 7:30 interviewee, resigned from Heal for Life after admitting to an inappropriate sexual relationship with more than one former guest. Except to that extent, Heal for Life has not and does not accuse him of anything. Sarah Monahan's comments about Harry Gallahan's behaviour seem more appropriate to the factual situation. There was also a strict rule about no touching, although you could ask someone if they wanted to share a hug and they could say no, and definitely no sex at the facility, even if it was consensual. We were told if anyone was found being intimate, they would be sent home. If one of the carers was having consensual sex with the attendees, as stated in the report, I can fully understand him being terminated. People are vulnerable and open. It's not the time to be having sex while you're dealing with sex abuse. In the follow-up 7:30 report, the dramatisation and the sensationalistic reporting continue in Sarah Ferguson's presentation of the program. Here are some examples of the dramatic editing into the program of the family's grief.
All the Chappell family have left of their much-loved daughter and sister are photographs.
It was basically an outrage. It was an outrage to us, and I also believe it was an outrage to Joe's memory.
Surely the ABC could have dug a bit deeper to reveal the real situation. Heal for Life paint a very different picture in their statement. There are a number of people who would have revealed the true situation to the ABC if they had done their research properly. Miss Hennessy's husband, the foster parents who raised her when her father would not, her close friends, Various people that Miss Hennessy had come into contact with at Heal for Life, and the relatively large number of psychologists that Miss Hennessy had consulted since she was a young child. The words to which Miss Hennessy's birth family took offence were Miss Hennessy's own words written before her death, and the father's criticism may have been nothing more than an attempt to discredit a victim of his abuse. There is a worrying consistency here between this program and the Over the Edge program in seemingly cover-up of alleged pedophiles. Interestingly, both programs being presented by Sarah Ferguson. As correctly questioned in Sarah Monahan's blog, why would this seeming cover-up even occur? If anyone was ready to speak out the way I have, I wouldn't put it past some of the perpetrators to try and discredit Liz in an attempt to discredit the victims. We've already seen how many cases have been swept under the rug in Australia. How many cases have been ignored? How many cases had nothing done till someone went public? Not just me. We're also seeing lots of high-profile people, including judges and magistrates, who are themselves being arrested for sexual assault against children. Victims are starting to talk. These people who thought that they were protected are starting to feel the heat. They're worried their little worlds are going to crumble. I have no doubt that the people in power, who are very high up in society, who have been getting away with it for years, would stoop to levels of discrediting someone who is helping victims, if they thought it meant they could save their own asses. So I just have to wonder why the ABC chose to go hunting to find past carers of Heal for Life. Why did they do the story? Whose idea was it? How much coercing was involved in getting these people on air? Did the carers approach the ABC, or did the ABC go looking for the story? Does Media Watch ever investigate stories on the ABC, or just from the commercial networks? What's the point of this investigation? Are there genuine concerns about Heal for Life, or is this just a witch hunt against Liz personally? The ABC seem a pretty habitual offender in their approach to dramatising and sensationalising a storyline. Even on their supposed critical program, Media Watch's presentation of Fiona Barnett. Right from the start of the program, Media Watch adds dramatic emphasis with an opening statement of,
But now to another example of sensational crime reporting and some far more remarkable allegations aired in the media 10 days ago.
Do you notice how the media now dramatises and sensationalises what is being reported on, rather than just presenting the actual facts of what is their job to report on? Do we really need to be told the same thing over and over again on different channels, more of the same repeated night in and day out? Media Watch then goes on to say that Barnett's claims are explosive, once again dramatising the facts. They are claims and not necessarily explosive in nature, but simply they are just her claims.
And that was just the start of it.
Remarks or comments such as this add drama rather than just delivering what is being reported on. We, the viewer, deserve to know the facts of the news as they are. This is not a movie for entertainment purposes. How many of us actually believe what is true that is presented on the news? How much of what we believe or are led to believe is false? We are very rarely given the chance to see the difference. Look at the newsreader's facial expressions here, adding yet another layer of dramatics to what Fiona Barnett is claiming happened to her. The ABC is funded by the Australian taxpayer. Wouldn't you rather they present the facts and not sensationalise and dramatise to coerce us into believing their interpretation of the story, especially when you are paying for it? The only thing clear in this news is that the ABC is not here to serve the public. The media is the problem. Australia would not be in the mess that it is in if we had true investigative media. Bad policies would be exposed. Bad governments would not get away with disastrous decisions. By hiding the voices of half of Australia, the ABC cost us $1 billion a year. The mainstream media are not dramatising this in any way, are they? The modern mainstream media, or mass misuse of media, presents news as theatrics and dramatics, as if a performance or a vehicle of propaganda, as clearly and honestly pointed out in the below videos on manufacturing consent.
Propaganda. Many use the word when talking about countries like North Korea, Kazakhstan, Iran. Countries viewed as authoritarian through the lens of the Western media. Press freedom, freedom of thought. People use those terms when talking about countries like the United States, France, Australia, democracies. In 1988, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that media acts as a check on political power, that media inform the public, serve the public, so that we can better engage in the political process. In fact, media manufacture our consent. They tell us what those in power need them to tell us so we can fall in line. Democracy is staged with the help of media that work as propaganda machines. Media operate through 5 filters. The first has to do with ownership. Mass media firms are big corporations. Often they're part of even bigger conglomerates. Their endgame, profit. And so it's in their interests to push for whatever guarantees that profit. Critical journalism takes second place to the needs and interests of the corporation. The second filter exposes the real role of advertising. Media costs a lot more than consumers will ever pay. So who fills the gap? Advertisers. And what are the advertisers paying for? Audiences. And so it isn't so much that the media are selling you a product, their output. They're also selling advertisers a product, you. How does the establishment manage the media? That's the third filter. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity. Governments, corporations, big institutions know how to play the media game. They know how to influence the news narrative. They feed media scoops, official accounts, interviews with the experts. They make themselves crucial to the process of journalism. So those in power and those who report on them are in bed with each other. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. Your name won't be down. You won't be getting in. You've lost your access. You've lost the story. When the media, journalists, whistleblowers, sources, stray away from the consensus, they get flat. That's the fourth filter. When the story is inconvenient for the powers that be, you'll see the flak machine in action, discrediting sources, trashing stories, and diverting the conversation. To manufacture consent, you need an enemy, a target. That common enemy is the fifth filter. Communism, terrorists, immigrants, a common enemy. A boogeyman to fear helps corral public opinion. 5 filters, one big media theory. Consent is being manufactured all around you, all the time.
You may want to ask yourself, did you consent to any of these influences? And if the answer is no, then why go along with it? Dr. Brzezinski is an example of an alternative doctor in the medical profession who has been predictably hammered by a dramatic and sensationalistic negative presentation in the media. Why is dramatisation ever needed? Wouldn't it only ever be needed if a story doesn't stand up on its own merit? If a doctor, for example, has done something illegal, harmful or dangerous to their patients, wouldn't just stating that fact speak for itself? What would motivate a journalist to make it sound bad or worse than it is? Wouldn't it suggest that they have an ulterior motive of some kind? The Houston Press, in their October 17th article, referred to earlier in this document, called the use of dramatisation into effect by saying that Dr. Buzinski swindled his patients, and went on to call him a self-anointed cancer curer. Journalist Ed Cara, also previously mentioned, employed this tactic here by calling Dr. Buzinski an infamous cancer doctor, and reported that Buzinski's detractors call him a dangerous quack. Mr. Cara didn't, however, say who was calling him a dangerous quack, or when they said it, or in what context. For all the reader knows, this statement could have been made up by the journalists. He goes on in the article to say that patients have emptied out their wallets, mortgaged their homes, and set up nationwide fundraisers to afford the hundreds of thousands of dollars needed to pay for treatment. This use of dramatisation clearly suggests that Dr. Buzinski is overcharging his patients. In his own documentary titled Buzinski, Cancer is a Serious Business Part 2, Dr. Buzinski states that the majority of his patients were people who conventional treatments could not cure, and in fact it was a prerequisite for them to be able to receive his treatment. He claims these people were already dying, the treatment was not causing deaths or shortening lifespans, and indeed there are patients of his that state this in the documentary themselves. The treatment would sometimes not be effective, as would the case be with any medical treatment. But if this doctor was causing deaths, or the rate that he was able to cure them was so low, then surely he would no longer be able to practice. Buzinski states,
once you eliminate such mutations, once you eliminate malignant stem cells, then the patient is cured. The patient can live normally over 20 years without having any sign of cancer. And that's what we are able to prove among our patients.
If Mr. Cara chose to say the same thing in a different way, he could have said that Dr. Buzinski has managed to cure some people of cancer that no other treatment on earth was able to cure. He has simply chosen to dramatise a different perspective.
Today, after defending himself against countless FDA accusations of fraud, Dr. Buzinski continues to treat cancer patients, many of which are cured of their cancers.
We are not making a judgment call about the services that Buzinski offers. Our aim is only to expose the journalistic techniques that have been used against him in the examples given. The mainstream media has to use dramatisation and sensationalistic language and imagery to achieve its objective of influencing the public to create the propaganda-fueled apathy that results in a collective consciousness of torpor and ordinariness. With the raw facts and without the influence, the public may be encouraged to think critically for themselves and have the opportunity to take a more objective viewpoint of the mass media influenced, propagated by the incestuous media propaganda machine. What conclusions can be drawn about the dilemma presented by modern media? It seems clear that the media, journalism and television is entirely out of control in covering the goings-on of leaders, celebrities and everyday people who speak out the truth in our culture. Take the 4 living individuals covered in this documentary as an example. At the other end of the spectrum, take the death of Lady Diana, the targeting of Michael Jackson over decades, the impeachment of a US president for private bedroom behaviours as more examples. We have seen evidence that this frenzy of voyeurism and attack and the need to know all the gore or juicy details of someone else's private life causes social imbalance and does not benefit them, ourselves or humanity. Unethical journalism by means of the media's techniques to manipulate content, dramatise the presentation of reports, and the use of bias or prejudice can lead to fatal consequences for people. Lady Diana died in a car accident while being chased yet again by the paparazzi. Michael Jackson was attacked, defamed and exploited by media for profit over years, and was accused of acts towards children in an extortion attempt. Yet many still do not question whether he was innocent because the full details and facts were not widely reported. only the sensationalistic drama was. Journalists went for the one-sided details of the accusation instead of thorough research and cross-examine of all the facts. The negative aspects of an event become the focus because that is what gets attention. That is what sells the product and keeps the gutter press in business. Are you still buying all of this misinformation? Where are the lines of civility, good taste, kindness, compassion, empathy, dignity, respect, professionalism and humane restraint drawn? When consumers consume products without examining their own habits and the effects of those habits, or they thoughtlessly consume products that harm others regularly for profit, they are complicit in the demeaning and harmful destruction of others and of their own humanity. When the humanity of others means so little, the individual and the whole race demises to dehumanisation. Increasing tolerance towards the slaying of others' images, reputations, livelihoods, life's work and privacy becomes culturally accepted. When an industry tolerates the death of one global humanitarian and the slow slaying of another over time, and the consumers of that industry do nothing, more casualties will come. It's inevitable. The editors of the media have admitted their culpability in the death of Lady Diana, but nothing appears to have changed. This practice of the media using its reach and power to create larger-than-life personas 1 minute, and then using those same powers to tear those same people down in the next, has the feeling of a modern-day gladiator sport. Meaningless destruction, misuse of power, cavalier treatment of human beings, so much waste and harm for what gain? It is not our gain, not your gain. Both Princess Diana and Michael Jackson were globally recognised microphones for humanity, evidenced by their body of work. Both leveraged their fame to become global humanitarians and philanthropic stars. There is no evidence that these two, nor none of the 4 everyday yet extraordinary individuals presented here in this documentary, Dr. Brzezinski.
Summary of our approach to treat cancer, which is based on information theory, and that this is something which is called today precision medicine.
Matthew Mike.
Through my own experiences and through working with thousands of people and getting great success this way, is that actually I don't even want to call myself a therapist, but really just a human being that understands that pain is a natural part of life.
Liz Mulliner.
If each one of you who has actually suffered from childhood trauma says, I have no reason to be ashamed of it, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault that my childhood was not perfect, and I deserve love and support.
And Fiona Barnett.
Focus on those victims who couldn't be here today to personally share what happened to them at the hands of the VIP pedophiles who have infiltrated Australia's supreme institutions.
Turned their backs on humanity when they had every reason to do just that. By their media using unethical methods and techniques to present them in an unfavourable light, humanity did not treat them well. The real question becomes, when we take on the bias and judgment that is intentionally stirred in us by the media's intentional misrepresentation of individuals, situations, life, we demonstrate enjoyment at the downfall of others. What does this do to our own bodies, our daily living? What do we do to our own humanity? How does humanity tragically lose to this brand of inhumane treatment? And how then do we create an atmosphere of peace or humane interactions? This is a contemporary question worth looking into because it defines us, who we are as humans. It defines our humanity and it determines what we are. Through our own questioning, we have a chance at giving ourselves and others a fair go. So the next time you're watching the news or reading a paper or magazine article, notice how you are viewing the subject of that article and whether you are being encouraged to see them in a particular light, good or bad. See if you can keep an open mind about them and not take on the influence that's coming at you. Chances are it'll be impossible at first. They have honed this skill to lethal perfection. But now you have your eyes open to it, so you will have a chance to decide for yourself whether you will keep willingly and blindly taking in media content as truth or simply as a story told to create a certain effect, or to stop watching and reading it altogether.